or if you're noticing that you're becoming dull and spaced out, then use the in-breath as an opportunity to arouse and refresh your focus on the breath, sharpening the focus. So relaxing on the out-breath and sharpening the focus on the in-breath. Does anyone have any questions about that meditation? Okay, let's move along then. We're going to now look at the faults. What sorts of faults could arise in this practice and how do we overcome them? So to do that, we're going to again look at your chart here on the back side. Up the top it says, Shamatha is attained by progressing through the 9 stages, which are these sort of 9 diagrams on the front. We're going to look at those this afternoon, briefly. It says, by relying on the 8 antidotes to abandon the 5 faults. So here we see a table with the 5 faults listed. The first fault in this practice is laziness. Seems to be quite a common fault in general, I think. And here we see that laziness has 4 antidotes: faith, aspiration, effort, pliancy. So like everything in our life, we tend to be lazy when it comes to doing certain things if we don't see any benefit. If there's no benefit in that activity, we tend to be very lazy when it comes to doing it. So similarly here in meditation, if we don't really appreciate the benefits of this practice, we tend to be very lazy when it comes to doing the practice. You know, if we're only doing the practice because someone said it's good for you, just do the practice, then we tend to be very lazy. We don't really put much effort into the practice. So therefore, the first antidote is faith. And faith here is faith in the practice. Faith that this practice is going to benefit us. So to get that antidote, we reflect on the benefits of the practice. You know, why are we doing the practice? What's the benefits that we will get from this practice? So if we really reflect on the benefits of the Shamatha practice, and we looked at some of those at the beginning this morning, that by doing the Shamatha practice, we're going to cultivate a calm, clear, and focused mind. I think that's something we would all like to have. And with that, in daily life, of course, we'll be much more effective in everything we do in our life, much less stress, much less mental imbalance, much more focus, of course, often then better physical health because of that, and we actually enjoy simple pleasures in life more as well. And then from a deeper level, from a sort of spiritual level, that by cultivating this calm, clear, focused mind, this is going to be the basis of all the other meditation practices. Because if we have a calm, clear, focused mind, it's going to be much easier to cultivate the Vipassana practice, to develop insight, to develop compassion, loving kindness, equanimity, patience. All of these practices are going to be much more effective if we have a calm, clear, focused mind. So if we reflect on these sorts of benefits of the Shamatha practice, then we'll have the first antidote. We'll have faith in the practice. We'll have faith that this practice is going to benefit us. So if we have faith in the practice that it will actually benefit us, we'll get the second antidote, aspiration. We'll want to do the practice. And then, of course, if we want to do the practice, we're going to get the third antidote. We're going to put effort into the practice. And then the more effort we put into this practice, slowly we're going to have the fourth antidote, pliancy. Pliancy here is flexibility, serviceability of body and mind. Now when we meditate, our body and mind is not serviceable, very serviceable or flexible. We have a lot of stiffness, a lot of pain in the body. We have a lot of resistance in our mind to doing the practice. As we progress in this practice, then both our body and our mind will become much more flexible and serviceable. Less problem from the body, less resistance from the mind. And so then at the very high level of the Shamatha practice, our body and mind really achieve this what's called pliancy, which I'll talk a bit more about this afternoon, where we have no longer any problems in the body and our mind no longer has any resistance. We can turn our mind to whatever we want without any resistance whatsoever. That's pliant body and mind. So that gradually develops the more effort we put into the practice. So these are the 4 antidotes to laziness. The second fault here is forgetfulness. And so, of course, the antidote to that is mindfulness. So forgetfulness can mean here not only forgetting the object, but forgetting the instructions. So mindfulness is to remember the object, to remember the instructions for the practice. Then we have the twin faults here of laxity and excitement. And these are sort of the technical words for dullness and distraction. So laxity is the technical word for dullness. And distraction, the most common form of distraction we have in meditation is we are distracted by something exciting, something pleasant. The so-called 5 sense pleasures, which actually are shown in your diagram on the front. If you look sort of part way up the diagram, you see a bowl of fruit. So that's taste. Next to it, there's some silk cloth. So that's touch, tactile. And above that, we have 2 round objects. These are symbols. So that's sound. And then next to it, we have a shell, a conch shell, with some perfume in it. So that's smell. And then a little bit diagonally above that, we have a round object, which is a mirror. So this is visual. So these are the 5 sense objects that are the most common form of distraction. So that's why instead of distraction, we have the word excitement, because that's the most common form of distraction. So these are the 2 sort of imbalances that we are trying to overcome. And of course, the antidote is introspection. So introspection's job is to notice if we're becoming dull or distracted. And if we are becoming dull or distracted, then to reapply mindfulness, to fix it. So the 4th fault, non-application, is exactly that. Non-application is we've noticed that we've become dull or distracted, but we don't do anything about it. That's a problem. That's a fault. That's non-application. So the antidote is application, which means fix it. You know, if you're dull or distracted, reapply the mindfulness. If you're distracted, then relax, let go of the distraction, return. If you're dull, sharpen the focus. So that's application. That's fix the problem. Then the last fault is over-application. Now, as a beginner, that's not really a big problem. Over-application is when we're actually focusing quite well on the object and we keep adjusting the focus unnecessarily. That's a problem. That starts to become, or could potentially start to become a problem as we're developing in the practice and we're actually focusing quite well and we keep adjusting our focus unnecessarily. That's over-application. So the antidote is equanimity, and here equanimity means balance, means leave the mind as it is because it's already balanced. So of course the saying here we can adopt is, if it's not broken, don't fix it. You know, just leave it alone. That's equanimity here. Leave it as it is because it's balanced, just stay there. So these are the 5 main faults and the 8 antidotes to overcome these 5 faults. Anyone have any questions about any of those?
The 4th antidote of the first one sounds to me like a result, benefit. How is it an antidote? How can I apply it?
It comes through putting effort into the practice. It's
result.
Well, it's a result of effort, but pliancy itself is the antidote to laziness. Because if we have a body and a mind that is completely flexible and serviceable, that an appliant mind means we have no resistance whatsoever to practice. We are enthusiastic about turning our mind to whatever we want. That's a pliant mind. I mean, with that, there's no chance for laziness to even come up. So this is the sort of the ultimate antidote, is to have that pliancy, that flexibility and serviceability of body and mind. So yes, that comes as a result of putting more effort into the practice, but then when we have that, that is the, well, it's not really well, in some sense it's not an antidote because it prevents laziness from arising in the, so it's more like a preventative.
Effortless.
Yeah, it becomes, effortless, basically.
I'm not sure I understood the application
Ah,
part.
okay. Non-application, the fault is we've noticed that we've become distracted or dull, but we don't do anything about it. We stay distracted, we stay dull. That's the fault. That's non-application. So application is basically means fix it. Means if you've noticed that you've become dull, sharpen your focus. Reapply mindfulness, sharpen the focus. If you become distracted, let go of the distraction and come back and hold the object again. So effectively application is to reapply mindfulness to the object. Because in both cases we've lost the mindfulness, either through being dull or being distracted. So that's application, is to reapply the mindfulness. Okay. What we're going to do now, before we go back to, before we go for lunch, is we'll go back to the practice. But one thing I want to mention before we do that, and that is exactly on this point of application, is, and we've already done this a little bit in the previous meditations, is when we become distracted, then our natural tendency is often to get frustrated, and then we just clamp down more tightly, because that's sort of what we tend to do in our daily life. If we get distracted, just clamp down more forcibly. So this is not really going to work here. So I introduced these couple of words that can help us to remind us what to do to avoid that if we become distracted. So for the event of becoming distracted, then to avoid this frustration, then the first thing to do if we notice we've become distracted is simply relax. Then let go of the distraction, just release it. And then simply return to the object, in this case the sensations of the breath throughout the body. So this, if we can remember for a distraction, is simply relax, release, return. Just keep that in mind. Then we can start to get in the habit of doing that instead of getting frustrated and clamping down more tightly again. And then with dullness, we can also have this couple of words to help us to what to do. Now, one of the most common reasons we become dull is we lose interest in the practice. So often then, what we can do, if we notice we're becoming dull because we're becoming lethargic, not interested, is to refresh our interest in the practice. Maybe very briefly reflect on the benefits, why we're doing the practice. Then, with that enthusiasm for the practice, then we restore our attention. So reapply mindfulness, so restore the attention. But then don't just restore it and drop it again, but then retain that attention, retain the mindfulness. So we can use this phrases here: refresh our interest in the practice, restore our attention, and then retain that flow of mindfulness of the object. Now, also I brought in the last meditation a little bit, is that we tend to fall into one of these two extremes of dullness or distraction. We tend to drift into one or the other. So what we need to do, of course, is balance. Find the middle way. And we can do this balance on every breath to help avoid falling into one of them. The out-breath is really a natural time to simply relax, release any distractions and return to the object. So on the out-breath, simply relax, release any distractions and return to the object. The in-breath is a natural time to restore, to refresh our interest, restore attention, retain the mindfulness, is to focus more clearly on the object, so sharpening the focus. So the out-breath is more relaxing, in-breath sharpening the focus. So if we do that on each breath, relaxing on the out-breath, sharpening the focus on the in-breath, we can find that balance of then having relaxation and focus and avoiding getting into distraction and dullness. So in this meditation now, we can play with that a little bit, is try and do that on each breath, on the out-breath, emphasizing the relaxation, releasing any distractions, on the in-breath, emphasizing sharpening the focus. And so we can play with that. But these can be some nice little words to remember to help us to be able to deal with these imbalances in our practice. Anything, questions about that? Yeah.
Directing the breath, sort of.
Directing the breath.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
What happened to me a lot. I felt some sort of degree of tension, and I sort of like breathed to that out. I breathed to direct the breath to go there.
Right.
And I wonder about that.
Yeah. I mean, of course, there are many practices, not just shamatha practices, where we work with the breath. Some involve visualization, some involve breath manipulation like pranayama, and they all have their own purpose for balancing subtle energies, for many different purposes. Here, of course, we are developing shamatha, calm, clear, focused mind. So in this practice, then we're not to do these things. We're not to manipulate the breath, visualize the breath, move the breath here, there, everywhere, which of course in certain practices can bring benefits of some way, but here doing those sorts of things actually is interfering with shamatha practice. In fact, to highlight that, if you look on your chart, over here in the side, number 19, you see a monkey in a tree. And if you look on the back, it says, since virtuous thoughts are an interruption at the time of shamatha practice, shamatha meditation, it is necessary to stop them. At other times, it is not necessary. And this is going to happen to all of you if you do shamatha practice, particularly if you get into the practice more. What you will find is that as your mind becomes calm and clear, a lot of great ideas are going to start to pop up. Solutions to problems, inspirational ideas, creativity will start to come up more and more. Good. But the middle of the shamatha practice is not the time to then entertain those thoughts. So if we have a great idea or we have a solution to a problem, then go, okay, great, I'll look at that after the meditation. If you're worried about forgetting it, you can even put a little notepad beside you and write down the key word to remind you after the meditation. But if every time you have one of these you go and entertain it, shamatha practice won't go anywhere. The more that you can let go of those and continue, the more you go in shamatha, the more you're going to have those come up. The more you entertain them, the less they'll come up anyway. But if you entertain them at that time, then that's an obstacle for shamatha practice. So, great, that's good. Let's look at that later. So that's what to do. So similarly here is, yes, we can do all sorts of wonderful, fancy things that may help, but to do them in the middle of shamatha practice is interfering with shamatha practice. Do them at another time.
And just one other thing. Up until recently, I never in my life meditated with my eyes open. It was just not there. Very recently, it began to happen a little bit. What I do find is that when your eyes are closed, there's no tension. When your eyes are open, there's also no tension because we're used to it or whatever. But when I do hold them partially open, it requires holding muscles tense.
Yeah. Right.
Physiologically.
So this is something we're going to look at in more detail tomorrow, because there's very much a recommendation for having the eyes open, observing the mind, and there's reasons for that, and I'll talk about that tomorrow. But here, then, with the eyes open, yeah, if you find that sort of tension or flickering or whatever, then just have them naturally open. That's fine. And then you can adjust the level. Like with the eyes open, if you find a little bit of agitation, you can lower the gaze a little bit. If you find that eyes open downwards, you're still getting dull, then you can raise the gaze a bit. So you can adjust the head position accordingly. So then you can, with the eyes, if you find them slightly open, there's sort of tension or flickering or whatever, then just have them naturally open. That's fine. That's fine. And we're going to look at that in more detail tomorrow.
I want to make a clear distinction between the distraction and the dullness. If I understood it correctly, then the distraction is external?
No, it can be internal. I mean,
internal also?
Yeah. If you have a thought, that's not external.
Okay, so I was thinking that the dullness is the
No.
dizziness of the brain.
No, dullness is when your mind is sinking and nothing registers anymore. I mean, there are degrees of dullness. You know, for example, you can focus on the breath, but you sort of notice something there, but it's not very clear. That's a level of dullness. But when it goes down to very heavy dullness, you don't notice anything. Because your mind is sunk so far, you're nearly half asleep. It's nothing's registering anymore. So there can be levels of dullness. One where things are not appearing very clearly, right down to where nothing's appearing at all because you're basically half asleep. That's heavy dullness. And then, of course, extreme dullness is falling asleep. Okay, let's do another practice. Now I want to work with the abdomen, particularly focusing on stabilizing our attention. And in this practice, again, what we're going to do is prepare well, as we normally do, focusing on the area of the abdomen, the rising and lowering of the abdomen.